All right. As with most things in the House of Commons, sometimes it's unavoidable. We have things that are happening, and today we had votes. So we're just gonna go straight into our. We have with us today as we continue our statutory review of the Copyright Act. We have with us from the Entertainment Software Association of Canada, Jason Hiltje, President and Chief Executive Officer. Element AI, Paul Gagnon, Legal Advisor. BSA, the Software Alliance, Christian Transcoso, Director of Policy, and Information Technology Association of Canada, Nevin French, Vice President of Policy. You will all have 7 minutes to do your presentation. If you can make it a quick 7 minutes, we'd want to be able to get everybody on file. So we're going to get started right away with Jason Hiltje from the Entertainment Software Association of Canada.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the committee for the opportunity to participate in this study today. And again, as stated, my name is Jason Hiltje, and I'm the President and CEO of the Entertainment Software Association of Canada. ESAC represents a number of leading video game companies with operations in this country, from multinational publishers and console makers to local distributors and Canadian-owned independent studios. Canada's video game industry is one of the most dynamic and prolific in the world. We employ close to 22,000 full-time direct employees while supporting another 19,000 indirect jobs. Our industry's contribution to Canadian GDP is close to $4 billion. And this is not revenue. These are salaries of our employees, those that our industry supports, along with their collective economic impact. And our impact is considerable. With only 10% of the U.S. population, Canada's video game development industry is roughly half the size of the U.S. industry, which is the world's largest. So I cannot stress enough how important Canada is within a global context with respect to the production and the creation of video games. Many of the most successful games globally are created right here in Canada. But like many other IP-based industries, piracy is still an issue for us, and we have to innovate constantly to battle it. One of the ways we have combated piracy is to move to a model where most of the games we produce have some sort of online component. This involves creating an account that enables content to be downloaded from a central server, or more commonly, including a multiplayer mode within the game. This is very effective in limiting the ability of counterfeiters to flourish, as pirated games will not be able to access the online functions that are offered. The only content the player accessing the pirate game will be able to use, in most cases, will be the single-player mode, which within our industry is becoming less and less common. In addition to making games that have this online functionality I just spoke about, our industry uses technological protection measures, both in the form of software encryption technologies and physical hardware found in video game consoles to combat piracy. These technological protection measures essentially do two things. They work to encrypt the data on a game that thwarts copying it, and they make copied games unreadable on the hardware console. While in many cases these measures do eventually fall victim to committed pirates who work to crack the game, they provide a window for the company to sell legitimate copies during the period of most demand, which is often the first 90 days. As encryption technology improves, it's taking longer and longer for the pirates to crack the game, which improves and lengthens the window a company has to recoup their investment in their product. In some cases, those who sell what we refer to as mod chips offer their services online with the promise to allow your console to circumvent the protections found within it and play copied games. These circumvention devices were made illegal in Canada in 2012 as part of Canada's Copyright Modernization Act. In fact, just last year, Nintendo used Canada's copyright law to successfully sue a Waterloo, Ontario company who was selling circumvention devices online. After a lengthy process, Nintendo was awarded over $12 million in damages, and multiple media outlets reported the ruling in federal court affirmed Canada's copyright law as one of the strongest in the world. The Copyright Modernization Act has proven effective by providing protections to content creators in the games industry. As our economy moves increasingly to one that involves digital goods and services, it's critical that these protections remain in place. But we can also do more to ensure that consumers understand the impacts of piracy. The notice and notice regime, in its purest form, has intentions to do this, but notices are not consistently forwarded from ISPs as is required, and consumers who receive those notices often do not understand them or ignore them. We believe there's an opportunity for the Government of Canada to work with ISPs to ensure that the notice and notice regime is properly enforced and utilized. Ensuring that these notices of infringement are regularly and consistently forwarded by ISPs is the most effective way to increase accountability and promote awareness and education opportunities for those who are infringing content, intentionally or otherwise. By better educating people about the harms of piracy, we can work to improve conditions for creators of all types. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We're going to move to Paul Gagnon from Element AI, please. You have up to 7 minutes.
Up to.
Up to.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I'd like to thank all the committee members. My name is Paul Gagnon, and I'm legal advisor at Element AI.
Je vais présenter mon témoignage en langue.
Of today's hearing. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak today. Element AI is a Montreal and Toronto-based artificial intelligence product company. We're celebrating our 2 years of activity shortly and making headlines all across the world with offices in London, Singapore, and Seoul. It's a great privilege to be before you today, especially as an IP geek. It's a great occasion to come in and comment on copyright reform. Element AI is bringing fundamental research as quick as possible into actionable products and solutions for companies. Our momentum is favorable. We're quite proud of our achievements, but the best is yet to come, which is why we're here. We want to discuss how Canada's place as a world leader in AI is not guaranteed. Indeed, we'd like to invite limited and targeted reform within the Copyright Act in order to clarify a specific use case around informational analysis, also known as text and data mining. This lack of certainty around the Act impacts a great, important activity for the development of artificial intelligence. This informational analysis within the context of fair dealing would be beneficial for all Canadians, more specifically as well, those who are active in the sector of AI. Indeed, this targeted exemption would help us secure a predictable environment for AI in order for it to maintain its unprecedented growth. Competition in AI is global. Other countries are actively building policy tools to draw in investment and talent. We urge Canada to do the same. When we speak to informational analysis, what are we referring to? We're talking about analysis that can be made of data and copyrighted works in order to draw inferences, patterns, and insights. Informational analysis, not the use of the works themselves, but to draw them and use and extract information from these works. It's distinct from using the works themselves. It's about abstraction. It's not about commercializing the works themselves and undercutting Canadian rights holders. Some quick examples. If we were to look at the paintings in this building when we walk in, it's not about taking pictures of these paintings and making t-shirts. It's about looking at the paintings themselves and drawing patterns, measuring distances, measuring the colors and tones that are used by artists. To use another example more relevant to your day-to-day in Parliament, if we were to look at the Hansard debates and use them for informational analysis, we wouldn't be binding books and selling the debates. We'd be perhaps using translated words to build more functional algorithms to translate works. So we see that here there's an abstraction. It's not the work itself. It's the information we can derive that's used. Data is truly the fuel that powers the engine of AI. Algorithms in AI-based products need diverse, representative, and quality data. That is the supply chain around AI, to provide actionable insights and data in order to provide better products and services. A good old expression in computer science is garbage in, garbage out. And this truly applies to artificial intelligence and informational analysis. Our AI will only be as good as the data we provided. Therefore, the targeted exemption we want to speak about today aims to broaden this scope in order for our AI to be quality, representative, and in turn made accessible for Canadians everywhere. Indeed, we think that with a clearer right in resolving the legal uncertainty around informational analysis, we think that we can drive fairness, accessibility, and inclusion of AI-based solutions. Really, better data means better AI. Under the current Copyright Act, how is informational analysis understood? How is it apprehended? the Copyright Act protects copyrighted works, but it also protects compilations of copyrighted works, but also compilations of data. So there's three fronts that are protected. As you've seen in the works of the Standing Committee, the Copyright Act is about balancing different interests, users' rights, access, but also rights holders, which is why we suggest that informational analysis be made part of the fair dealing exemptions. Fair dealing exemptions are limited in purpose. The Act clearly states purposes around what kind of intention we can bring to analysis we can draw. So research use, for example, private study, news reporting. Where there's an overarching public interest, the Act has clarified that there's a clear purpose that's permitted within fair dealing. Now, informational analysis, as we've explained it, how is it apprehended as the Act exists today? It's not clearly addressed. And so there's legal uncertainty around this. And, we could look perhaps to the temporary reproduction exemption, though that doesn't quite fit. If you turn to specific fair dealing exemptions, research, private use, this isn't clear. And we think that it's within reach of Parliament to clarify this and in turn help drive investment and certainty for Canada's AI sector. Now, if we look at research purposes more specifically, the uncertainty here is quite impactful. Indeed, it could permit the informational analysis itself under research, but there's clear uncertainty as to whether we can leverage this insight, this research, into products and solutions. And so relying on solely the research exemption might not be enough. Now, we suggest that this exemption not be limited to the identity of the specific entities conducting this informational analysis. Truly, if you look at research around AI, the public sector is quite active, as is the private sector. At Element AI, we collaborate every day with researchers in universities across Canada. If we were to really clearly exclude commercial entities such as ours to perform this research, it would fundamentally misapprehend the nature of research in Canada. What's the impact of this uncertainty? We think that in time, if we do not bring this additional added clarity to informational analysis, we think it can have real and practical impacts on Canada's competitiveness in the AI sector. We think it can deter R&D investments, create risks for businesses. Not having legal clarity around informational analysis disproportionately impacts startups and SMEs. Why? Well, as we all know, certainty and predictability are the currency for our entrepreneurs. On the other hand, big players have deep pockets to litigate and fight through this uncertainty. We might not have this luck for our startups and SMEs. So should we wait for this to be litigated in court and clarified downstream 2 or 3 years on? We don't think so. We think there's a great opportunity to clarify this now. We often hear that we live in the age of big data, which is true. In terms of volume, there's massive amounts of data generated every day. But there's a huge data gap. Because we generate that data, it doesn't make it accessible to smaller players. Indeed, there's a huge gap between who controls and has access to this data. And so to ensure the competitiveness of our SMEs, of our startups, and of our more established companies, it's essential to make sure that there can be clearer access to this data in order to bridge this data gap, in order for this chasm between internet giants not to be broader. Informational analysis under the fair dealing exemption, we think why it fits well under fair dealing is that it benefits from past interpretation of the courts. It's a clear framework. It's one that aims for fairness, and that through case law has established clear criteria that we can rely upon. We think that those criteria are flexible, adaptable to different use cases. Fundamentally, copyright protects the expression of ideas and information, not that information and ideas as such. It's a fundamental principle of copyright law. Fair dealing in this context, especially for informational analysis, brings a clear fence that we think is quite reasonable and clearly brings more certainty to our private sector. Now, the key point here is that an exemption for informational analysis can help democratize access to data and create certainty for our emerging AI industry. In turn, this will help maintain Canada's leadership role as a global hub for AI. Thank you.
very much. And we're going to move on to Christian Transcoso from BSA Software Alliance.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Vice Chairs, and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Christian Troncoso, and I'm the Director of Policy for BSA, the Software Alliance. BSA is the leading advocate for the global software industry before governments and policymakers around the world. Our members are at the forefront of software-enabled innovation that powers the global economy and helps businesses in every industry compete more effectively. Because copyright policy is a critical driver of software innovation, we're deeply appreciative for this opportunity to appear before the committee today. This committee's review of the Copyright Act comes at a very timely moment. With the recent announcement of the Pan-Canadian Artificial Intelligence Strategy, Canada has staked out an ambitious goal of becoming a global leader in the development of AI. This committee has a critical role to play in helping realize that vision. To become a global leader in AI, Canada will need to set in place a policy environment that will enable its R&D investments to flourish. One critical competitive factor will be access to data. AI research often requires access to large volumes of data so that software can be trained to recognize objects, interpret text, listen and respond to the spoken word, and make predictions. Ensuring that Canadian researchers can compete with their counterparts in other AI leading nations will therefore require careful examination of government policies that affect their ability to access data. Copyright is one such policy. As currently enacted, the Copyright Act may place Canadian researchers at a disadvantage relative to their international competitors. For instance, unlike the US and Japan, the Canadian copyright system creates uncertainty about the legal implications of key analytical techniques that are foundational to the development of AI. This committee can shore up the legal foundations for Canada's investments in AI by recommending the adoption of an express exception to copyright for information analysis. Many of the most exciting developments in AI are attributable to a technique called machine learning. Machine learning is a form of information analysis that allows researchers to train AI systems by feeding them large quantities of data. This so-called training data is analyzed for the purposes of identifying underlying patterns, relationships, and trends that can then be used to make predictions about future data inputs. For instance, developers have created an app called Seeing AI that can help people who are blind or visually impaired navigate the world by providing audio descriptions of objects appearing in photographs. Users of the app can take pictures with their smartphones, and the Seeing AI app is able to translate for them through an audio description what is occurring in front of them. To develop the computer vision model capable of identifying those objects, the system was trained using data from millions of photographs, depicting thousands of the most common objects we encounter on a daily basis, such as automobiles, street crossings, landscapes, and animals. It would be understandable if you're wondering to yourself right now what any of this has to do with copyright. The uncertainty arises because the machine learning process may involve the creation of machine-readable reproductions of the training data. In some instances, the training data may include works that are protected by copyright. In the case of Seeing AI, that would be the millions of photographs that were used to train the computer vision model to identify common objects. To be clear, the reproductions that are necessary for machine learning are used only for the purposes of identifying non-copyrightable information from the lawfully accessed works. However, the Copyright Act currently lacks an express exception to enable that type of informational analysis. Therefore, there's considerable uncertainty about the scope of activity that is permitted under current law. This uncertainty poses a risk to Canada's AI investment and provides a competitive advantage to those countries that provide firmer legal grounding for the AI development. Japan is one such example. In 2009, Japan passed a first-of-its-kind exception for reproductions that are created as part of a, quote, information analysis process. Earlier this year, the Diet amended the exception to make it more broadly applicable for AI research. Analysts now credit these legal reforms for transforming Japan into what they call a machine learning paradise. In the US, courts have also confirmed that under the fair use doctrine, incidental copying to facilitate information analysis is non-infringing. And in September, the European Parliament voted in favor of a new copyright provision that would provide member states with the flexibility necessary to create broad exceptions for information analysis. Singapore and Australia are currently considering the adoption of similar exceptions. These developments reflect an emerging consensus that the creation of machine-readable copies for purposes of information analysis should not be considered copyright-relevant acts. Copyright protection was never intended to prevent users from analyzing a work to derive factual, non-copyrightable information. So it makes little sense for copyright law to prevent such an analysis merely because it's being performed by a computer. To ensure that Canada's significant investments in AI will pay dividends long into the future, the Copyright Act should be modernized to provide legal certainty for this common sense proposition. The reproductions that are made in the course of training AI systems are unrelated to the creative expression that copyright is intended to protect, are not made visible to humans, and do not compete with or substitute for any of the underlying works. In other words, an exception for information analysis poses no risk to the legitimate interests that copyright is intended to protect. Copyright is ultimately intended to provide incentives for the creation of new works. An exception for information analysis advances this objective by stimulating the creation of new research and enabling the discovery of new forms of knowledge. By recommending the adoption of this exception, this committee will ensure that the Copyright Act remains fit for purpose in an age of digital intelligence. Thanks, and I look forward to the questions.
Thank you very much. And finally, from the Information Technology Association of Canada, Mr. French, you have up to 7 minutes.
Chair, honorable members of the committee, it's a privilege to be here today to discuss the review of the Copyright Act on behalf of the Information Technology Association of Canada, also known as ITAC. ITAC is the national voice of Canada's ICT industry, an industry that includes over 37,000 companies, generates over 1.5 million jobs, and contributes more than $76 billion to the economy. In today's world, technology can and is outpacing our laws and regulations, and it's crucial that Canada, as a global leader, does not fall behind. Today, I'd like to address how the Copyright Review will fit into the bigger picture of the digital economy in Canada, and then I'll focus on machine learning and artificial intelligence, and the ways copyright rules and regulations will be impacted. Copyright plays a crucial role in protecting owners while promoting creativity and innovation, vitally important when it comes to the tech sector. The key is finding the balance between protecting the rights of the creator with the ability of users to access and benefit from their creation. The difficulty in maintaining the balance between both ends of the spectrum, otherwise the entire balance of the digital economy will suffer. In short, we need to get this policy right. Let's take a quick look at Canada's technology landscape. This has been an exceptional year of investments in Canadian technology with unprecedented job growth, sizable FDI, and several Canadian tech firms going global. In today's economy, a tech job could be in almost any sector. Many tech-related jobs are no longer just about computer science or programming. It's now about combining anything you're passionate about with technology. This includes healthcare, environment, energy, mining, agriculture, creative arts, as well as core tech jobs like cybersecurity, networking, and data analysis. This is why ITAC has worked with post-secondary institutions to create business technology management programs that blend training in business and tech. This is important because the battle for tech talent is now fought on a global scale, and Canada is in a unique position and is viewed as a leader. And that's one of the reasons why so many big-name tech investments is taking place across the country. Technology and its application in cutting-edge fields is no longer a domestic feel-good story. And Canada is a serious player in the digital world economy and a destination for investment and a world leader in artificial intelligence. Over the past year, global talent is strongly flowing into Canada, including from the US, which something unforeseen not too long ago. Almost every city in Canada has tech incubators, and there's many examples of massive global tech firms investing significantly in tech jobs. Equally important, there's also a domestic technology growth going on here as well. owing to increased access to talent, venture capital, and public support for small business. This adds to a combination of competitive tax rates, business costs, and a strong economy that form an environment that is ready for success. And a key reason for this success is that we have the right approach to copyright, a very balanced approach, and this should continue. The Act is working. We need to be careful about recommending sizable changes that may have unintended consequences to other industries. The tech industry believes that the 2012 review was a successful and an important factor in the growth of the Canadian tech sector. There's no escaping the reality that technology has changed our world forever, and the sheer amount of data that exists and will grow will require the use of machines to be able to sort that data. Computers far surpass humans' ability to quickly download and process data, but when they are used in conjunction with human thought and intuition, the way we work, learn, and grow, the ways we navigate the world around us can be done so much more efficiently. As I said in the outset, our role as a national industry association is to work closely with our members. And so we reached out to them to ask about copyright concerns, and they all said artificial intelligence or AI and machine learning. Canada needs to match its vision of being a leader in AI with a policy framework that supports AI development and commercialization. This requires policies that promote access to data. And broad access to data is fundamental to AI. AI research and products need large quantities of data so that software can be trained to interpret text, recognize patterns, and make predictions. Broad access to data is also needed to mitigate the risk of bias in AI solutions. The importance of access to data has been recognized in other countries, including the US and Japan, where copyright laws explicitly allow for the reproduction of copyright-protected works to facilitate information analysis by computers. If Canada does not amend the Copyright Act to provide a similar exemption to infringement, it's reasonable to predict that we'll fall behind these other countries, with AI talent and investment capital migrating to more favorable jurisdictions. And we need to be clear, adding an exception for information analysis does not undermine the interests of content owners. The right to read, understand, and analyze information and data has never been subject to control under copyright laws. Using a computer to learn more efficiently when compared to manual reading, viewing, or observing works does not implicate the rights of owners. Owners will continue to control access to their works. Today, there's a global AI race as other countries are trying to catch up and surpass Canada in this industry. And just because Canada is seen as a global leader, we cannot rest on our laurels. For years, we've said, if only we can convert our reputation from being pure researchers into developing business, well, AI is one of these opportunities. We do not want a chilling effect on the growth of AI in Canada, especially right now. And poor policy choices will especially impact and harm small firms, which are the backbone of our economy. If we do not enable broad access to data, SMEs and startup firms will be impacted the most. These enterprises and firms will have little or no data on their own, making access to published works and data critical to their research and commercialization efforts. Broadly, this is what we propose. The committee acknowledged that the Copyright Act does not implicate the copying of lawfully accessed works for AI purposes, and the committee recommending that a new exception be added to the Copyright Act to clarify that copying, analyzing, and using lawfully acquired works and data to develop new knowledge does not require authorization of the copyright owner. If we want Canada to maintain an industry leadership position in AI, we need to get this policy right. ITAC has traditionally called on government to better engage the tech community in the development of policies, and frankly, we're pleased to say that government, including this committee, is doing more and more of this. Industry can provide insight and share knowledge and expertise, especially important with new technologies. How can government support the growth of technology industry? It does not need to be direct funding, although that can help. It can also be setting the policy framework that strikes the right balance. As Canada continues to grow the tech sector, access to data is one variable, along with financial capital and talent and commercial opportunities that can help ensure investments continue. We believe that the global best practice can be applied to the copyright review, and the Act is a mandatory review every 5 years. However, technology will continue to outpace the speed of legislation. Thus, we're looking for changes to copyright, but we're looking for a surgical approach. The committee has been assigned a very tough job, and it will be very hard to try to please everyone. However, our overarching message is that the Act needs a surgical update, and frankly, we'll need a scalpel going forward, not a hammer, given the rate of change. In closing, I'd like to thank the committee for the extensive consultations they've done thus far, and look forward to and thank you for the opportunity to present our industry perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And mindful of the time, we're going to jump right into questions. Ms. Cesar Chavan, you have 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you to each of the witnesses who are here today. If I could direct my first set of questions to Mr. Hitchie, is that correct? Hilchie, correct. Thank you. What is the current cost to you related to piracy within the gaming industry? Do you have any idea?
It's always been a challenge to kind of quantify that number because we know how much we sell legitimately, but you know, we're not able to kind of put a number on the actual legit copies sold versus those that have been pirated. But it's large. It's mainly much more large now toward like cloning and mobile games. Mobile games are now being cloned, and cheats exist online and things like that. But if you're looking for an exact number, I'm
Okay.
unable to give that to you.
That's okay. We know that this is a growing industry. Students, we have some students here from Algonquin College. I have students in my riding at UOIT who are part of, you know, a growing set of students who are going into gaming. I told them I'll give them a shout out.
Okay.
And so I'm just wondering if I could have a better understanding of what of the impacts of continued piracy, especially when you look at gaming being used for things like healthcare, for other industries that are not particularly just somebody in their home in front of a computer playing an actual game. What are some of the impacts of this particular copyright when we look at privacy issues or the impact on future developments where you use games for something outside of the gaming industry, for example, like healthcare?
Okay, so the answer to your question, the first one I believe is about the impact of copyright on like maybe smaller video game companies trying to make it within the video game industry. The first is I can say to that there are about 600 video game companies in Canada. We're producing over 2,100 different products a year. The vast majority of those products are coming from small independent studios of 2 to 5 people who are making games that they self-publish on the App Store on a mobile device, and they're making these either with the self-financing or help from bootstrapping it or whatever. Discoverability in our industry is one of the most difficult things that we're dealing with because there are so many games that are coming out all the time. So it's hard to find. First of all, it's very difficult to make money in video games and independent video game production if you're trying to sell games legitimately. So anything that ends up pirated is just confounding that situation even worse. With respect to copyright, along the lines of the way that our industry is moving toward more serious industries such as aerospace or healthcare, even AI. We're a heavy player within the development of some of the user interfaces within self-driving cars and things like that. I'm unaware of any type of copyright implications that would cause issues with that. We create some programs that end up being used in serious purposes outside of the entertainment industry, but we also partner with universities and with other independent technology companies for medical device purposes and so forth. So, I can only assume that those organizations are going through the proper channels for approval and copyright. So,
Perfect.
I'm
Thank you.
unaware.
Thank you. My other questions are directed to the AI guys on the end. And I want to start off by saying that I understand the need to stay competitive and for Canada to be a leader in this domain, which all three of you very clearly stated in your testimony. My question is that do companies profit from the abstractions or the predictions that AI produces?
I think the notion here of profit is, of course, the goal is to develop tools that, ultimately, indirectly, were fed off and developed by access to that data. So if I use the expression supply chain, right? So at the beginning, what you have are fundamental techniques, algorithms and basic hunches of how to build a product or to solve a solution. If you want specific examples, we can think of development of tools for the environment, right? We would say, okay, great, we want to develop a tool that has better prediction of local weather patterns, perhaps tornadoes in the Ottawa area. That was a topic of note recently. But you look at agriculture, you can say, okay, great, we want to develop tools that improve yields, crop yields, or get smarter about environmental impacts. So from there, you're going to look at diverse data sources to develop tools and say, okay, well, maybe the deciding factor is when to sow seeds on a field. And that's what the algorithm's going to look for. Now, it'll come from diverse sources of information to get to that answer. And that's where AI is actually truly powerful, because it can combine and apply this wide-ranging data and then come to a more digestible answer in a way that human minds cannot necessarily do.
So at some point, though, there is some degree of profitability from the tools that are made from the predictions.
Right.
Is that correct?
Right.
So I guess my question is, if you're mining this data and there is copywritten material within that data, then who along the supply chain provides that compensation back to?
But that's
the
I
owner?
think is a point. There's a market failure around this because
Okay.
it's so voluminous.
And I think it's important to think about it in sort of everyday terms. If I read a book on how to invest in the financial markets and I make a lot of money, I don't think that anyone would assume that I owe part of those profits to whoever the author of that book was, right? And so we don't generally sort of assume that any time a work was used in some way that generates any sort of profits for anyone, that whoever the author was is necessarily owed sort of financial compensation for that. I think the AI that we're
But the person paid for the book.
certainly, and certainly it's very important, I think, to make the point that I don't think, I won't speak for anyone else, at least speaking for myself, we're not seeking an exception to get access to new forms of works. We are perfectly prepared to pay for access to works. That is fine. But once a company has obtained and paid for access to a work, they should be able to analyze those works, much as you do when you read a book yourself that you've bought from a store.
I never run out of
Thank you very much. We're going to move to Mr. Albus. You have 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm actually going to exercise the motion that I have on deck in regards to what I said at committee. So I'm going to ask the indulgence of members and our witnesses, and I'm going to be as brief as I can because I do think it's important to get this out of the way, and hopefully the members will support. So I'll just, for members who don't have it in front of them, the motion was to assist in the review of the Copyright Act, that the Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology requests Ministers Freeland and Baines, alongside officials, to come before the committee and explain the impacts of the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement on the intellectual property and copyright regimes in Canada. So first of all, it is challenging for the clerk and the chair to be able to get the ministers, and so we have Thanksgiving. We don't have a lot of time before we rise for the Christmas break, so I just would hope members would support this motion. There's a lot that's in this new agreement, and I do think it impacts our work that we're doing here today. So I would ask for members' support in this request.
No, sorry, you're third up on the list. Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay, Mr. Sheehan.
Well, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for the motion. And of course, the information is being discerned right now, and will be debated in the House. So, what I'm saying is that perhaps later, but not right now. So I can't support it right now, but at some point in time, that we'll be taking a look at various aspects of the new USMCA deal. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jahari.
Mr. Chair, I move to adjourn the debate.
Okay, so that's a non-debatable. So we go to a vote for that.
Really?
I don't think that's...
It's non-debatable. I don't understand what the concern is. It's non-debatable.
Point of
So we
order.
go to a vote on that.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Having chaired parliamentary House of Commons committees before, my recollection of a deleterious motion is to adjourn the committee, not to adjourn debate. I've never recalled a situation where a member of a committee was permitted to move a motion to adjourn debate on a motion that would be considered a dilatory motion. My understanding that adjourning committee is non-debatable, it being a dilatory motion, but not to adjourn debate on a motion in front of the committee.
It is a dilatory motion. We've actually, this has happened in our committee on numerous occasions. We don't adjourn the committee, we adjourn the debate on that motion. And that's what was called. It is non-debatable. If you'd like, the clerk can explain that to you. Mr. Massey.
Point of order, just for clarification. So then, technically then, I suppose it might be right, but I guess that would then just be the fact that breaking from the more collegial approach to this committee, the Liberals want to shut down even the interest of allowing people to have an intervention. So I think that perhaps you might be right on the technical aspect of it. It clearly sends a message to members like myself who can't even participate, at least for a moment, in something put on the table. And I think that perhaps that you will be ruling in favor of this, but I want to make sure that it is a technical thing, but certainly is counter to the history of this committee and what we've worked towards.
Mr. Massey, I would agree. I think part of the challenge is we have witnesses in front of us with very limited time because of the votes. There's not been a vote to shut this down. This is, as Mr. Sheehan had said, there is not adequate time today to debate that. And again, we do have witnesses in front with limited time. And we've always tried to operate in a collegial way, and I want to make sure that you have your time with the witnesses as well. So, look, it is a non-debatable motion. So,
as my understanding that we can bring this debate up at the next meeting when we have more time.
You certainly may.
But just for today.
You certainly may. There's two choices here. You either vote the motion down, right, and it's done. There's nothing. That's it. It's over, or you bring it up again in the future, right? And from what I'm understanding, there's not a desire because of our lack of time to actually have a sustainable debate about this.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just one last quick. So even though I have an amendment to the motion, I cannot even put the amendment to the motion.
I go by the hands that go up. So whoever has the floor. So
thank you.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that's clear with everybody. So we are going to go to a vote.
Ask for a recorded vote.
Fair enough.
On the motion that the debate be now adjourned, Ms. Chavan, Ms. Cedar Chavan, Mr.
Yes.
Graham, Mr. Jahari, Mr. Saini, Mr. Sheehan, Mr. Albus, Mr. Chong, Mr. Lloyd, Mr. Massey. Yeas 5, nays 4.
Okay, motion has been defeated.
Motion was carried.
Sorry, motion had been carried, yes, sorry. I will ask, if you can keep, because I do want to make sure that Mr. Massey gets his time. So, if you...
I would just go straight to the Entertainment Software Association of Canada. And so video streaming is a huge market right now. We see Twitch streamers getting viewer numbers that many TV shows would be envious of. Streamers are making money from playing a copyrighted work. However, they're also showing potential customers the work. How does the video game industry see streaming? Is it free advertising, or do you believe it's copyright infringement?
The answer to that is that Each company that has its content being streamed online has different policies with respect to that. Some actually partner with the streamers in order to partner in the revenue that comes from the advertising revenue that comes from that channel. Others flat out ban it, and others, like you say, encourage it because it does promote the game. But you're right in that it is the copyrighted protected property of the companies, but each one has their own policy for it.
So what is your policy on streaming of games as an organization?
My policy on streaming of games with respect to...
So do you believe that the current Act provisions allow for a fair use of that copyrighted material, or is it something that your members haven't given you your marching orders on?
Like I said, each member has their own policies with respect to the streaming
of
the TV. I don't have a particular policy on the streaming of games when it comes to simply playing the games. That's outside the scope of what I do.
So we've also heard from the music industry that they would like sound recordings used for movies or TV shows to require repeat broadcasting royalties. Obviously, some of the games that are created by many of your members are akin to almost a movie-like production. And so do you know how that would affect the video game industry, and would your association oppose such a move?
The issue was?
The soundtrack recordings, because we do have musicians and people that create sounds that when it's included into a work, that they're seeking further, every time it's rebroadcast, a sound is used, that they should get a further royalty.
So every company that licenses music for a game or creates music for a game would license that through a management or a collective or something that they would pay for that, typically up front. But with respect to, and I don't know if you're referring to the making available right, which is respect to an issue that's currently ongoing before the Copyright Board.
There's an exemption for sound recording, but it sounds to me like that there's an established practice in your industry of people being paid for the use of work.
Absolutely.
But again, some artists are asking for there to be a continual stream of incomes from the repeated use of sound recordings.
Okay, the only one that I'm aware of is the current issue that's in front of the Copyright Board with respect to the making available right. Okay.
So in regards to machine learning, so I'm just going to throw this out, the element AI. Obviously, there sounds like there's an unlevel playing field with Japan and the United States for the certainty that you're asking for. We also have another group that's made a briefing available to this committee called the Canadian Legal Information Institute, which talks about the Crown Copyright Provision, Section 12. That they say that there needs to be further clarification on the use of Crown materials. So, for example, a government bill, a debate in Parliament, and whatnot, because they can't use chat boxes to explain, new requirements or regulations or whatnot. So is this along the same lines of what you're saying, is that there's not sufficient certainty for the use of machine learning, but would you also do believe there needs to be certainty on the use of Crown copyright?
I definitely believe that there's that additional clarity can be reached under Crown copyright as well. It ties back into open data initiatives as well. If you look at license terms that are offered by the government under open data licenses, the aim is to make these things available without restrictions. Now, that isn't completely harmonized across different levels of government, but even within different data sets or different information made available by government under Crown copyright. So additional clarity there definitely would be most helpful.
Okay. I really wonder what those AIs would learn, though, listening to all of our debates. And
That's
whatnot.
funny.
But anyway, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move to Mr. Massey. You have your 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the witnesses for being here. I'll start with the Gaming Association, because I think that people just think about it just in terms of console gaming, but the reality is that South Korea, for example, has a Minister of Gaming, and it's a serious development with regards to everything from advertising, issues related to training, and sport is really where it's headed, or is already there. You did mention, and it's kind of interesting too, because you've used innovation in many respects to block some of the piracy that's taking place. The quandary, is, say, for example, like the new Spider-Man, is that, yes, you can play it individually and offline, but to get the full game experience that you want out of the purchase, you do need to go online for it. And that also requires higher broadband speed, so forth, and what it might be. But can you at least provide some type of, and I think that's it, more of a how you came about looking at a technological solution to combat piracy versus that of other before the committee here have come with just basically asking for more enforcement or and that I would really point quickly in Windsor we used to have a lot of piracy with regards to DirecTV, for example, where it was so easy to basically get this American channel system. And when we introduced some new measures, it eliminated it. But at any rate, can you maybe look at, provide a little bit more of what the industry's done to actually invest in that, combating piracy, I keep saying private, with regards to innovation?
So, as I've said in my opening remarks, and I'd like to reiterate this, we, similar to ITAC, feel that the Copyright Act is working. We're not looking for many changes. What we are looking for is to ensure that the technological protection measures and the circumvention clauses within the Copyright Act remain through any review. Because, as you say, the technological innovation that has happened in our industry to block those who would pirate our games has been one of the reasons that we've been able to continue to grow. Look, TPMs could be anything from a password that would allow you to enter something. It can be that simple, and it can be as complicated as hardware in a console that makes copied discs unreadable. So headers on software that would identify what is an authentic copy versus an inauthentic copy. And quite frankly, in Canada, we've been fortunate enough that our industry was at the center of a federal court battle where Nintendo used the new law to challenge the clauses and the TPMs, and were successful in getting damages and remedies against a company that was selling what we call mod chips. That essentially would allow people to play copied games, but also do a number of other things to the console that it was not manufactured to do. So, quite frankly, as Mr. Troncoso said, copyright is really there to ensure that creators have an incentive to continue to make new products. And for us, TPMs are one of the number one ways that we protect the creative works that we put out in order to make revenue so that we can continue to make products.
Okay. I do want to register for I think it's not for this discussion here, is that there's certainly a lot of positive elements in terms of transferable technology, but also I have some concerns with regards to loot boxes and so forth like that. So a lot of exciting things happening in the industry, but I do want to move over with regards to, I used to be a former board director for the CNIB. So I'm and as an employment specialist, when I had a real job, used to do job accommodation, including voice software and recognition. So perhaps you can, I want to make sure I understand this correctly. You're looking to purchase the imaging and materials that have been out there one time and then allow them to adapt to the technology that you're driving? Is that kind of, do I have this a little bit off? That's what I'm trying to get a full understanding and appreciation.
I mean, I think that there are sort of an infinite number of AI possibilities and different use cases, but as a general matter, sort of what we would advocate for is a copyright exception that says if you have access to a work, you should be able to use a computer to analyze that work, compare it to other works, and look for correlations and patterns that can then be used to develop sort of an AI model that can be used for sort of future things. So in your case, voice recognition, what you might need is a sort of large corpus of recorded speaking. In addition, you might also need sort of transcripts of what were on those recordings. You would then train an AI system based on, and it would be a large, very large corpus, thousands, hundreds of thousands of hours of voice recordings and then the transcripts to create a model so that the AI system looks for the patterns, matches the voice to the transcript, and then can do that again in the future when it hears like a new sort of speech.
You would be, I guess, concerned about having every time that's in play, having to pay a fee for every time that after your model's developed, as opposed to you do.
Yeah, I think that would be the concern. I think right now there's a bit of a legal gray area.
Okay.
Where a lot of this research is happening.
Yeah.
There's, the potential of AI is so great, it's so lucrative, and it's going to be helpful to virtually every industry that, companies are generally willing to, at the moment, to take, their tolerance for risk may be a bit higher. I think if there were to be an adverse court sort of decision that says, yeah, in fact, all of this is infringing, it would have really adverse impacts on Canada's investment in AI.
Okay. How much time do I have? About 30 seconds. All right. Well, thank you very much, and thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. And we're going to go to Mr. Graham. You have your 7 minutes.
Thank you. I understand Mr. Lemedi has a quick question before it comes back to me.
Thank you. Thank you. The question's from Mr. Hilchi. I think you'd find a lot of sympathy for using technological protective measures to protect the game itself, and if you're moving to an online environment in particular. If the game has to be played on a particular kind of box, how far should the technological protection extend? I know you have the federal court decision in your favor, but does that prevent? Should a TPM prevent you from using a box to play any kind of game because you've got a physical box that perhaps might be better dealt with under the realm of patent? Now that's extension 2, and then extension 3. Should a technological protection measure be used, that same kind of protection, to prevent a farmer from amending the data or copyright protected material that happens to be on his tractor and not being able to use it and get along with it? At what point should we be drawing lines?
That's a good question. Well, 2 good questions. With respect to the video game console, and again, we do have the federal court decision in our favor. I mean, in that particular case, Nintendo was arguing that the games that they make for that console should only be played on that console, and that console should only play the games that they make, and vice versa. I mean, this person was arguing that essentially technological protection measures through an exemption for interoperability would allow them to essentially play homebrew games or independent games on the box. I mean, there's really no position in any of the major video game console makers' business models right now that don't involve working with small independent developers to put content on their box. They're all very much in competition with each other. Exclusives in our industry are now a very, very big thing. And so, if there is a game that should only be played on an Xbox, then, there's been significant financial investment made on that game to be only an exclusive on Xbox, and then I see no reason why a TPM should not protect that ability to do so. With respect to the farmer, I don't know whether I'm qualified to answer that question, but I take your point. Yeah, I will.
Yeah. Thank you. I understand it's back to me now. Let the record show that Mr. Massey doesn't think he has a real job. Just a point there. So. I want to stay on TPMs, which Mr. Massey and Mr. Lemedi have gone a lot into. The fair dealing exceptions apply to a whole lot of things. There's a whole lot of situations where you have a fair dealing exception. You're asking for a new one to allow aggregate data analysis. If there's a TPM on that data, should the exception still apply? All of you who've advocated for this.
Around the exemption for informational analysis is the theme of lawful access. Mm-hmm. I don't think my presentation made that clear enough, but we see lawful access as an important component of that. It's not about undercutting business models and accessing through illegal means or means that are not authorized that data. The counterpoint to that is we have to also make sure that that right is effective. So if I'm legally accessing a work through a contract, well, that contract should not have a provision forbidding that informational analysis either, right? So I don't think the exemption that we're stating is required necessarily means that it needs to be unlawful and completely, reckless access to works and data, because that finally would not respect the balance of the act between rights holders and users' rights.
So if somebody produces something that has a TPM on it that's locked, and the TPM definition is so loose that the fact that it's on a computer could be defined as a TPM in the first place. But if something has a TPM and you want to access that data for your analysis, should that exemption apply? That's my simple question. Or should the TPM take precedence over the fair dealing exemption?
I'm not aware of court cases that have resolved this issue yet. I tend to say that the TPM would probably mean that lawful access is not mandated.
Should reverse engineering itself be legal?
I think the Act provides for clear rights on reverse engineering in clear specific settings for interoperability, security purposes. So I think the Act accepts that there are purposes that override this and allow for a certain form of reverse engineering. As citizens in the digital world, I think these kinds of provisions are somewhat important to make sure that we're not locked into platforms we no longer can analyze or control, but in a very limited context.
So are there circumstances you believe reverse engineering should not be legal?
Sorry?
Are there circumstances in which you believe reverse engineering should not be legal?
I think that the Act right now strives a good balance in identifying specific cases where reverse engineering it makes sense. For example, security measures to identify, the underlying security structure. And, you look to another example on interoperability. I think that gives consumers a good deal. I mean, as we saw with Mr. Lomedi's question, there are still interrogations as to whether that's enough freedom, but in limited context, I think we can have these purposes be able, but I wouldn't argue for a broad reverse engineering right.
Okay. Do we have a shortage of software programmers, people qualified to do that in the world right now? In your opinion? That goes to all of you.
In the field of AI, we definitely have a shortage of AI researchers and people skilled in the art, definitely.
Okay. I worked in the industry of high tech for quite a long time. I'm still involved in it and have been for more than 20 years. And what I've noticed is that the people that I'm involved with are largely the same people that I was involved with 20 years ago. And what we all have in common is that we all took our computers apart in the basement. We knew how the things worked. I remember using hex editors to hack games. It was fun to do. And the generation today doesn't have that access. They don't have the access to the machines which you can't take apart anymore. Is that a problem, and can we use copyright to address it so that the next generation actually know how these machines work and can develop to be the next generation of developers?
I think IP statutes, whether the Patent Act or the Copyright Act, do give some space, whether private study, research exemptions under the Patent Act can allow for this kind of basement hacking. Mm-hmm. Definitely the commercial exploitation of that hacking would be off limits. In the field of AI, I think we're lucky that we're really in the world of open source software, right? Mm. And a very collaborative community. So ideally we can tinker out in the open and learn from that and share that knowledge with everyone else. So a bit of a counterpoint to the basement analogy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have time for a quick question from Mr. Lloyd.
Thank you, and appreciate you all coming out here today. My question for the Entertainment Association, a lot of people are using mods these days with games, and I'm just wondering, is there any concern from the Entertainment Association that mods are creating copyright infringement issues?
So when you're talking about mods, like modified games,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, absolutely.
So there's a huge issue with copyright there?
Yeah, it's essentially hacking a game. It's bypassing the anti-circumvention.
But would you agree there's like some legitimate uses for mods? Like some mods can be like creative.
Okay, so there's actually exceptions in the copyright bill that allow for for modifying games. The interoperability exception is one of them, but also fair dealing for research and educational purposes and things like that. Mm-hmm. So those things already exist. But with respect to mods, yeah, that's a massive issue for our industry.
What if it's just for personal use, like non-commercial use? Is that a concern?
Then I believe that it falls within an exemption that's already existing within the Copyright Act.
So the commercialization of mods is a very serious issue.
Absolutely,
okay.
Absolutely. Which is why that we're here today to ask for to ensure that the technological protection measures remain within the copyright bill, because they work and they're extremely valuable for our industry.
And just like a quick follow-up, you know, I noticed like Blizzard Entertainment, they just released StarCraft, you know, very well-known game. It's now free online. And like for a company to make a decision like that, they're obviously foregoing some revenue. But are those decisions possible in a universe where copyright isn't protected?
So I'm unfamiliar with the specific game or the business model that they've taken, but perhaps you know, they're offering it for free, and there are in-app purchases that they will bring in revenue streams through. Our industry is evolving and changing rapidly, and so we have numerous different business models that we use, including subscriptions for online games and in-app purchases, things like that. So I would suspect that there is some sort of business model built into that. But with respect to copyright, again, I mean, without the ability to protect the game, to be distributed and played the way that it was intended, it certainly limits the incentive for companies to continue to create and invest.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I wish we had more time, but we don't. We will have to go out and do some voting coming up. Thank you, everybody. We are adjourned.